Hey friends, I'm the storyteller. Before you get too comfortable, do me a small favor, hit like and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy this kind of storytelling. And while you're here, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Paige Doherty was just 15 years old when this story began. She was born on the 17th of April, 2001, in Clydebank, a small town in Scotland. She lived with her mom, Pamela Monroe, her stepdad, Andy Monroe, and her younger sister and two little brothers. It was a happy home. Like any family, they had their ups and downs, their arguments here and there, but they were close. And Paige, she absolutely adored her family, especially her stepdad, Andy. In fact, at one point, she even wrote on Facebook that Andy was the best thing that ever happened to her. She and her mom were especially tight, more like best friends than mother and daughter. Pamela had Paige when she was quite young, so there wasn't a huge age gap between them. They connected over everything: makeup, fashion, music. They even looked alike like sisters, some people would say. Paige was tiny, just 4 feet 8 inches tall, incredibly petite for her age. She had long, dark brown hair that she dyed, and she loved to dress up. She was your typical teenage girl into selfies, social media, and everything trending. Everyone who knew her said she was kind, sweet, soft-spoken. She was always respectful, thoughtful, never the type to cause trouble. Her mom described her as someone who wouldn't hurt a fly. On Friday, the 18th of March, 2016, Paige stayed the night at her friend Lauren's house. It was just a sleepover, nothing out of the ordinary. The next morning, Saturday, the 19th of March, Paige got up early to head to work. She had a part-time job at a hair salon, about a 20-minute bus ride from her house. It wasn't anything big, just a little weekend job she picked up while she was still in school, something to earn a bit of her own money. And because her shift started pretty early, she always made the same stop on the way. She'd pop into a shop or a small deli near the bus stop to grab some breakfast to take on the ride. So that morning, Paige left for work. She followed her usual route, heading toward the bus stop, planning to grab something quick to eat like always. But by midday, something felt off. Paige's boyfriend, Dylan, still hadn't heard from her. No texts, no calls, no updates, nothing. And for Paige, who was always on her phone, always sending messages, that was really unusual. Like I said earlier, Paige was always on her phone, constantly texting, posting, scrolling through social media. She was that kind of teenager. She was always connected. And she wasn't the type to ignore people either. If you messaged her, she replied. She didn't leave people hanging just for the sake of it. So when her boyfriend Dylan hadn't heard from her by midday on that Saturday, it immediately felt wrong. There was no fight, no bad blood between them. Everything had been fine. He was expecting the usual text, maybe a quick good morning or even just a got to work safe message, but the hours ticked by and there was still nothing. Now, of course, it's possible for a phone to die. People forget chargers. It happens. But for Paige, that would have been unusual. She was glued to that phone. She rarely let the battery run out. And if she had forgotten her charger at home, chances were someone around her, maybe Lauren, the friend she stayed with the night before, or even someone at work would have had one she could borrow. This just wasn't like her. And Dylan knew it, so he started to get worried. Trying not to overreact, he picked up the phone and called Paige's workplace, the hair salon, where she worked weekends, just to check. Maybe she'd just been really busy and hadn't had time to reply. But when her boss answered the phone, Dylan's heart dropped. The woman told him very plainly that Paige had never shown up that day. Not late, not running behind. She never walked through the door at all. Panic set in immediately. Dylan hung up and called Paige's mom, Pamela, right away. He needed to let her know just in case Paige was at home sick or had changed plans and forgotten to tell anyone. But when Pamela picked up the phone, she froze too. Because now that Dylan mentioned it, she also hadn't heard from Paige all day. Of course, Pamela had noticed the lack of a check-in message that morning. Paige always texted her when she arrived at work. Just a short, "I'm here." Nothing elaborate, but enough to ease her mom's mind. But Pamela, being a mom of 4, had been busy that morning. Between looking after Paige's younger siblings and the general chaos of a weekend morning, she'd managed to convince herself that everything was fine. She had tried to rationalize it, Maybe Paige had forgotten her charger. Maybe she was still with her friend Lauren and lost track of time. Maybe she was just busy at work. All the little excuses we tell ourselves when we don't want to believe something might be wrong. Pamela kept repeating one thought in her head. She'll text me later. I'll see her when she gets back from work. Is nothing. But now, Dylan was telling her that Paige never even arrived at work. And suddenly, all those little excuses didn't feel so comforting anymore. Paige was just 15 years old, but she was independent. Every weekend, she took herself to work without issue. She was smart, not reckless, and her mom trusted her. Paige wasn't some naive little girl. She had a good sense of her surroundings. She'd done this routine so many times that Pamela never really worried. Not seriously. But after hearing from Dylan that Paige never arrived at work and realizing she hadn't sent her usual text, Pamela began to feel that creeping sense of dread. Dylan went straight to Paige's social media accounts, hoping for some kind of sign, maybe a post, a like, a comment, anything to show that she'd been online. But there was nothing. The last time she had posted anything was the night before, and that's when the fear really began to settle in. This wasn't just Paige being late. She wasn't just distracted or busy. She had gone silent. And Paige never went silent. At that point, they knew they couldn't wait any longer. They called the police. This wasn't normal. Paige had never disappeared like this. She'd never vanished without a word, without posting, without checking in. Everyone felt it. Something was wrong. When officers arrived at Pamela and Andy's home, they began gathering information right away. They asked questions, checked timelines. Meanwhile, friends, family, and classmates began spreading the word on Facebook and other platforms. Posts were going up fast asking if anyone had seen Paige, urging her to get in touch if she could. People were resharing the posts, tagging others, hoping for any small lead. As daylight faded and evening came, the reality became harder to deny. Paige still wasn't home. It was getting dark, and she hadn't been seen or heard from since that morning. That's when the search efforts began in full force. Police officers and volunteers started combing through the local area in Clydebank, checking streets, paths, and wooded spots. The search rolled over into Sunday morning, with everyone hoping she'd turn up safe, maybe dazed, maybe hiding, but alive. But by the end of that Sunday, there was still nothing. No texts, no calls, no new posts, no sign of Paige. At this point, people started to lose hope. That gut feeling, the one you tried to ignore, started getting louder. It wasn't looking good. Now, police always have to consider every possibility, even in situations like this. So, while running away wasn't completely ruled out, it was highly unlikely from the start. Yes, they looked into it. But the idea of Paige running away just didn't make sense. She was happy at home. She had a routine. Sure, anyone can act happy and still be hurt. Police knew that too, but there were other things that made the runaway theory hard to believe. The biggest one? Paige hadn't contacted a single person. Most runaways, especially young ones, stay in touch with someone. A friend, a cousin, a classmate. They might send a quick message, even anonymously. But Paige hadn't reached out to anyone. It was like she'd vanished off the face of the earth. And she was only 15. She didn't have a job with income, no bank account, no way to live independently. If she did run away, she'd have needed help, someone to stay with. But everyone she knew had already been questioned, and no one had seen her. So her friends and family decided to act fast. They launched a dedicated Facebook page, Help Find Paige. Within hours, her name, her face, her story, it was being shared thousands of times, across towns, across cities. Because truly, when it comes to missing persons cases, honestly, social media is one of the best things. In the days after Paige's disappearance, her mother Pamela did everything she possibly could to bring her home. She started by posting photos of every single item Paige had been wearing that morning, her jacket, her shoes, her school bag, anything that might jog someone's memory. She even posted the exact route Paige would have taken to get to work. Streets, bus stops, familiar shops, everything. Anywhere Paige might have passed that morning. Pamela just wanted to give people something, anything that might help them recognize her daughter if they saw her somewhere. And it wasn't just Pamela. Everyone who knew Paige, her friends, her family, even distant classmates or acquaintances from school, started flooding social media with messages. Desperate ones, pleading ones. Pamela herself wrote something that stuck with a lot of people. She said, "I'm totally sick with worry, and I just want my little girl home. She's not in trouble, she just has to get home. She's safe, and she's loved." The entire community was mobilizing. Volunteers, friends, family, they started printing posters with Paige's name and her face, sticking them up all around Clydebank, the town where she lived. But they didn't stop there. They covered the area around her workplace too, just in case Paige had managed to get to her job or if something had happened along the way. Meanwhile, police were retracing Paige's steps. They knew she left her friend Lauren's house that Saturday morning. That was a confirmed fact. And they also knew she never arrived at the hair salon. So the question became, where in between did something go wrong? Investigators began by physically walking the route Paige would have taken. Lauren's house was close to Paige's own, so it was the same route she always took to get to her usual bus stop. Near that stop, there was a small row of 5 shops clustered together, like a little terrace block. Police went into each one, asking employees if they had seen Paige that morning. In the very first shop they entered, they spoke to a man named Ashi Ahmed, the shopkeeper, and right away, he said yes, he had seen her. He told them he saw Paige walk by his shop that morning, heading in the direction of a nearby deli. He even remembered the time, exactly 8:15 a.m. He was sure of it, because that's when he was always in the back, making the rolls for the day, something he did at the same time every morning without fail. He said Paige passed right in front of his door. He waved at her and she waved back. The two had seen each other before. She'd come by the week prior to buy a roll. But that Saturday morning, she kept walking, and instead of coming into his shop, she headed next door to a place called Delicious Deli, owned by a man named John Leatham. People around the area knew him as Johnny, so that's what most people called him. Later that day, Ashi said he ran into Johnny and asked if he'd seen Paige that morning. And Johnny told him that yes, Paige had come in. He said she seemed cherry, bright, just like she always was. After speaking to shopkeeper Ashi Ahmed and confirming that Paige had been seen around 8:15 a.m. that Saturday morning, police began working on the next step, CCTV footage. They went door to door asking all 5 shops in that small row near the bus stop if they had any footage from that morning. What they were hoping to find was simple confirmation of what Paige was wearing, and maybe, just maybe, which direction she headed after walking past those shops. But there was a problem. Almost every store had cameras, but they were all indoors, positioned only to record what happened inside the shop, not outside. Nothing that would help track where Paige went once she left the frame. Only one shop had an exterior camera, Ashi Ahmed's. His shop had a single outdoor CCTV camera mounted to face the pavement. It was their only lead. Ashi explained that his camera ran on a 12-day loop, which meant that every 12 days, the footage would be wiped and recorded over. Thankfully, this was still within that window. Police acted quickly. They didn't want to risk losing anything. From that footage, they extracted a 3-hour clip from Saturday morning just to cover the time Paige would have been walking to the shops and getting her breakfast. She wouldn't have been there long, maybe 10 minutes or so, but they wanted a clear window before and after, just to be sure. The footage was taken back to the station. Investigators were preparing to go through it in detail, slow it down, check her clothes, her movements, anything to help piece together those missing moments. But before they could even hit play, they got a call. It was Monday, the 21st of March, 2016, just 48 hours since Paige had left her friend Lauren's house and disappeared. The call came from a local dog walker. The voice on the line sounded shaken. He said he'd seen something in the bushes, something that didn't look right. Human legs, sticking out from underneath a thick patch of undergrowth. Police responded immediately. They arrived at the scene and quickly cordoned off the entire area. There, hidden beneath the bushes, they found a full female body. It had been dumped, hidden, but not well. And what made the discovery even more chilling was the location the body was found, just half a mile away from the spot where Paige was last seen, outside those shops. The body was removed and taken in for identification, and a post-mortem was scheduled right away. Police didn't want to confirm anything publicly until they were absolutely certain. But even before anything official was said, Paige's family was informed. They were told that a body had been found. At first, police couldn't say it out loud. They couldn't officially confirm that the body found was Paige Doherty, not without formal identification. All they could tell the public was that a female body had been discovered and that Paige's family would be brought in the next day to confirm whether it was her. But even before that happened, there was a feeling that everyone, especially Paige's mom, Pamela, just knew. At the time, there were only 3 missing girls in the wider area. One of them was blonde. The other 2 had dark hair. One of those brunettes was Paige. That same Monday night, one of the other missing girls, the second brunette, was found safe, and that was it. Pamela said that in that moment, when she heard the news, her heart sank. She just knew the body had to be Paige. So the following morning, Tuesday, the 22nd of March, Pamela, along with other members of the family, went to identify the body. There was no hope left to hold on to. It was her. The postmortem confirmed it. And then it revealed something even worse. Paige's official cause of death was massive blood loss from stab wounds. The exact number of stab wounds varies depending on which source you read. Every news outlet seemed to give a different figure. But the number that appeared most consistently across multiple reports was 61 stab wounds and a total of 150 injuries overall. But Pamela Paige's mother doesn't believe that. She's gone on record saying she thinks her daughter suffered far more than what was reported. In her words, the actual number of injuries could be as high as 500. She believes the media and even the authorities have tried to downplay the extent of the violence her daughter endured. She believes there's been an effort to soften the story. To keep the public from knowing just how brutal it really was, most of the injuries were concentrated on Paige's body, neck, and head, specifically the left side of her neck. Pamela has said that almost half of her daughter's neck was gone. It was unimaginable. And it wasn't just one weapon used in the attack. According to police, there were 3 different weapons believed to have been used: a knife, a pair of scissors, and a screwdriver. This wasn't a random, spur-of-the-moment act of violence. This was something else. Whoever did this didn't just grab the nearest object in a panic. They looked for more weapons, actively chose to escalate the brutality. They wanted to prolong it, drag it out, make it worse. And in Pamela's words, whoever did this to her daughter wasn't just trying to kill her, they were trying to keep it exciting. Pamela believes many of the details of the case were held back from the public. Not just the number of injuries, but the fact that multiple weapons had been used. Almost no news outlets mentioned that part. Most people still don't know. Of course, the major injuries, the stab wounds, were the most devastating, but there were smaller injuries too. Scratches, grazes, bruises, evidence that Paige tried to fight back. She didn't go down without a struggle. Then, the day after her body was found, things got even more chaotic. Photos started circulating on social media, disturbing ones of a young boy holding a bloodied knife, claiming he and his friend were the ones who had killed Paige. People thought it was a sick joke. But one of the boy's own friends came forward. He told police he'd been on FaceTime with the boy who had shown him the same knife, one that still had a red substance on it. He said the boy described the attack, claimed he was involved, and started calling different girls, telling them he and his friend had killed Paige. He gave grim details, told them they burned their clothes afterward, bragged about it, just really strange things. Of course, police looked into that boy, the one from the photos on social media, and his friend. They had to. With the kind of details he was sharing and the image he'd posted, they couldn't ignore it. But, as you've probably already guessed, it was all for attention. He had nothing to do with Paige. He didn't know her. He wasn't involved. He wasn't even close to the case. He just wanted people to look at him. Whether he faced any kind of punishment for making such an awful, misleading claim, that part's unclear. But he should have. Imagine how terrifying it must have been for the people who heard him, for the friend who saw him holding a bloody knife on FaceTime, or for the girls he called and told horrific details to. It was cruel, and it stirred up panic right when the town was already in crisis. Meanwhile, while police waited for the CCTV footage from Ashi Ahmed's shop to be processed and formatted for viewing, they kept working the streets. They were going door to door, questioning every shop owner along Paige's route, anyone who might have seen her that morning. They'd already spoken to Ashi. who said he saw Paige walk past his shop around 8:15 a.m., heading into the deli next door. So, the next stop was obvious. Delicious Deli, owned by John Leatham. When officers walked into the shop and asked John if he'd seen Paige that morning or if he recognized her, his initial answer was no. He said he didn't know her, didn't recognize the name, didn't remember seeing her that day. He explained that his shop had so many customers, he couldn't possibly keep track of every single face that came in and out, that it was just impossible. And sure, on the surface, that makes sense. People come and go, right? But Clydebank is a small town. Most of his customers were regulars, locals, the same faces week after week. And Paige, she wasn't a stranger. She came into that shop multiple times a week. Eventually, after a few hours of questioning, John suddenly changed his story. He told police that yes, he had seen Paige that morning. He said she came in, bought a breakfast roll, chatted briefly, and then left to catch her bus. He claimed she seemed totally normal, calm, polite, friendly, just like any other time she'd stopped by. Nothing seemed off. And according to him, that was the last time anyone saw her. Once Paige walked out of Delicious Deli that morning, she vanished. What happened between that moment and when her body was discovered 2 days later, no one knew. The bus system didn't keep track of names or identities. There was no way to tell if she had boarded a bus. No record of passengers, no paper trail, and that made it even harder for police to determine one of the most crucial pieces of the investigation. Was Paige killed in Clydebank, her hometown, or had she made it to her work town and died there? After days of speculation, police began leaning toward one conclusion. Paige never made it to her bus that morning. The location where her body was found just half a mile from where she was last seen made that theory more and more likely. Think about it. If Paige had really gotten on the bus and traveled 20 minutes to another town, why would her killer go to all the effort of driving her body all the way back to where she lived and then dump it just down the road from the shops? It didn't make sense. What made more sense was that she never got on the bus at all, that something had happened to her between Delicious Deli and the bus stop, and that her killer simply left her body close to where she had been attacked. Eventually, the CCTV footage from Ashi Ahmed's shop was finally processed. And when investigators watched it, there she was, clear as day, Paige Doherty, entering Delicious Deli at exactly 8:21 a.m. on Saturday, the 19th of March. Police kept watching, waiting to see her exit, waiting to see which direction she turned after she left. Did she head for the bus stop? Did she talk to anyone? But she never came out. The full 3-hour clip ran from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., and Paige was never seen leaving the shop. She walked in and never walked back out. This raised serious concerns. Paige had only gone in to buy a breakfast roll, 10 minutes max. So why didn't she leave? Wanting more context, police returned to Ashi Ahmed's shop and asked for the full 12-day loop of footage, everything. Maybe they'd missed something. Maybe there was unusual activity around the deli. Maybe Paige came out later, off frame, after the 10 a.m. cutoff. They needed every angle they could get. At the same time, they walked into Delicious Deli, the last place Paige was ever seen, and brought John Leatham in for questioning. By now, they were suspicious. John had initially denied ever seeing Paige that day. Then, hours later, suddenly remembered her visit, claiming she popped in, bought a roll, acted normal, and left. But now they knew that wasn't true. So police asked him if he had any CCTV footage from inside the shop to help verify his story. Maybe she stayed and chatted longer than usual. Maybe something happened. They just needed clarity. John handed it over willingly. But when investigators watched the footage from inside Delicious Deli, they realized something was very, very wrong. A huge chunk of it was missing. So much footage from that Saturday morning had either been deleted or wasn't there at all. And more importantly, the footage that did exist never showed Paige inside the shop, which made no sense. The exterior CCTV clearly showed her walking in at 8:21 a.m., so why wasn't she on any of the indoor footage? What happened between the doorway and the counter? Did John give police a reason for why the footage was missing? If he did, it was never reported. No news articles mention any kind of explanation. No official police statement offers clarity. So I'm sorry I can't say why those tapes were incomplete. But the missing footage, especially on that morning, is suspicious either way. While police continued watching the 12-day loop of CCTV footage from outside the row of shops, they noticed something that was becoming more and more unsettling. Paige was never seen leaving, not once. Investigators pored over hours and hours of footage, entire teams working in shifts, checking frame by frame, angle by angle, and yet not a single second showed Paige walking back out of Delicious Deli. At that point, fear set in. If Paige walked in and never walked out, then the possibility that she had been killed inside the deli and that her body was never removed through the front became a very real and horrifying possibility. So police took action. They sent a forensic team to the deli and cordoned off the entire scene. They needed to search the building from top to bottom. But while all of that was happening, something else caught their attention. Something deeply strange. As investigators continued combing through the exterior CCTV footage, they noticed odd behavior from the shop owner John Leatham beginning around 10 a.m., almost 2 hours after Paige had entered the deli and was never seen again. Footage showed John running out of his shop and into another nearby business. He bought a few items quickly, then ran straight back to his own shop. Witnesses said that during this time, the shutters on Delicious Deli had been pulled down as if the shop was temporarily closed. No explanation was ever given for that. He closed his own business, his only source of income, right in the middle of a Saturday morning for no clear reason. And now he was darting between stores, buying random things and returning in a hurry. Then, at exactly 10:03 a.m., John exited his shop again. This time, he walked across the street toward his car. He opened the boot, or, if you're international, the trunk, and began clearing the space inside. CCTV showed him reorganizing the back of the car as if making room for something big. Now, this part of the story is never been shown to the public. There's no footage to be found online, and the media never released it, but it was described by Paige's family, who were later shown the footage by investigators. According to them, John is seen exiting Delicious Deli carrying a large black bin bag. It looked like a bag of trash, the kind you might take out to the bins at the back of a store. He carried it in both arms, like it was heavy. He walked to his car, still holding the bag, and at one point nearly collided with a child who happened to be passing nearby. Then, without hesitation, he opened the boot and placed the bag inside, just like he was taking out the rubbish. But that's not how things usually work. You don't close your entire shop, your livelihood, in the middle of trading hours just to take out one bag of trash. You don't drop everything, lock the shutters, and run around between shops if it's just a routine bin bag, especially when waste collection services exist to do that for you. And if you're working alone, running a business, every minute that shop is closed is money lost. Every customer turned away is another sale gone. It made no sense for him to stop everything just to take out the trash, unless it wasn't trash. Because at 11:59 a.m., John got into his car and drove away. The black bin bag was in the boot. And to the police, this was one red flag after another. Why was he rushing? Why did he close his shop? Why that exact timing, 2 hours after Paige entered? But most of all, what was in that bin bag that man had to take it and not someone else? By Thursday, the 24th of March, the evidence had piled up. What had started as suspicion was now something more. With Paige never leaving his shop, the missing CCTV footage, and that large bin bag loaded into his car, police decided it was time. John Leatham was arrested on suspicion of murdering Paige Doherty. He was 31 years old, a local businessman, a deli owner, and a father of two. He had a baby with his current wife Katya and a 9-year-old daughter also named Paige from a previous relationship. As the arrest was made, police also carried out a full search of John and Katya's home, looking for anything that could be linked to the crime, a murder weapon, traces of blood, clothes, bin bags, anything that could help them complete the puzzle, and then something even more chilling surfaced. Before Paige's body had even been found back when she was still officially listed as missing, John Leatham had appeared on local news. He'd done one of those interviews, the kind where a member of the community speaks to the camera, expressing sympathy, acting shocked, saying how unusual something like this was for their town. He stood there and said, "I've got a little girl too. I'd hate for anything like this to happen to her. I can't imagine if my little girl went missing. I really hope they find Paige safe." And it didn't stop there. He reached out to Paige's family, to her grandfather specifically. He shook his hand, told him he was thinking of them, told him he hoped the police found answers. He even offered to sit down with Pamela, Paige's mother. He invited her to his home, said they could talk about Paige, since he was the last one known to have seen her that morning. Pamela declined. She didn't see what there was to talk about. And honestly, no one else did either. The details of John's police interviews haven't been made public. No official transcripts, no media coverage from inside the room. It's still mostly private. But from what's been shared, it's believed that in the beginning, he stuck to his story. Claimed Paige had walked in, bought a roll, and left. Same as always. But police already had CCTV footage proving that wasn't true. She never came out. Then there was the other footage, John running out of his shop to make a purchase. So police tracked down the shopkeeper where John had rushed in that morning. They asked what he bought, whether he seemed panicked, stressed, in a hurry. The shopkeeper said yes, John was in a rush. And he bought 3 things: bin bags, bleach, and antibacterial wipes. 2 days after his arrest, John Leatham appeared in a private court hearing. He didn't say much. He made no plea, neither guilty nor not guilty, just remained silent. But that silence didn't last forever. On the 5th of September 2016, exactly 6 months after Paige Doherty was murdered, John Leatham appeared in court and pled guilty to the murder of Paige Doherty. When John Leatham finally confessed to murdering Paige, he gave a reason, or at least his version of one. He said that on the morning of the 19th of March, Paige came into Delicious Deli like usual. She asked for a breakfast roll. According to him, everything seemed normal. She was the only customer in the shop at the time, and they made casual small talk as he prepared her food. It felt like any other Saturday morning. Then, he said, their conversation shifted. Paige apparently started talking about her job, how she didn't like it, how she wanted something different, and that's when she supposedly mentioned wanting to work at the deli. John told her she could fill out a job application, just a simple form in the back room. He said she followed him through, sat down, and started writing. But then, according to John, something changed. He said that when she filled out the form, she wrote down her age, 15. And when he saw that, he told her he couldn't offer her the job. After all, she was too young to legally work there. That's when, in his words, Paige became angry. John claimed that she threatened him. She said if he didn't give her the job, she'd go to the police and accuse him of inappropriate behavior of trying to touch her. Now, here's where John's personal history comes into play. He has a twin brother, and that brother is on the sex offenders register. His brother had been convicted of rape, and John claimed that ever since, his brother's life had been completely destroyed, and rightly so. He said his brother struggled to find work, lost jobs when people found out, and had to live with the weight of that label sex offender every day of his life. So when Paige allegedly made that threat, John said he panicked. He said he thought about his brother, about everything his brother had lost. And in that moment, he decided he couldn't let Paige go. He told police that he feared his life would be ruined, just like his twins. So he grabbed a knife and he stabbed her. That was his justification. That somehow killing a 15-year-old girl in cold blood was a better outcome than being accused of something he insisted he didn't do. He acted like he had no choice, as if murdering a child was a logical way to protect his reputation. And of course, no one buys it. Even if, and it's a big if, Paige had said something like that, it still wouldn't justify what John did. It wouldn't make his actions make any sense. But the truth is, most people don't believe Paige ever said those words to begin with. And in a moment, we'll talk about why that story doesn't line up and why so many people believe it's just an excuse. But what's important now is this. Pamela, Paige's mother, does not believe John's story. Not a word of it. And honestly, not many people do. Pamela Paige's mother never once believed John Leatham's version of events. And when you hear more about Paige's life, you understand why. Paige already had a job she loved. She worked at a hairdresser's surrounded by people she cared about. She loved beauty, loved makeup. It was the kind of career she wanted to build for herself. This wasn't just something to pass the time, it was what she wanted to do when she got older. So the idea that she'd want to leave all of that behind to work at a sandwich shop, it didn't make sense. Not that working in a deli is something to be looked down on, but it just wasn't her path. It had nothing to do with the passion she had, the future she was working toward. And more than that, her family said it was completely out of character for Paige to threaten anyone, let alone a grown man. Of course, to someone who didn't know Paige, that might not sound like strong enough evidence. It's just her family's word, after all. But when you put it together, the fact that she already had a job she cared about, the fact that she had no reason to ask John, for one, the whole thing starts to feel false. Most people agree John's story doesn't hold up. And in the end, no one really knows what actually happened inside that deli. We don't know what was said. We don't know what John was thinking. We don't know what pushed him to commit murder. Whether it was something premeditated or something that escalated in the moment, it's all speculation. But what many believe, though it's never been officially confirmed, is that after John killed Paige that Saturday morning, he took her body back to his house, that he hid her in the shed right there in his garden. And then he carried on with his weekend. He went back inside and spent time with his wife and kids. One of them was just a baby. All the while, Paige's body was just outside, lifeless in the cold, not even a few meters away. Then, on Monday morning, John allegedly moved her body and dumped it where she would eventually be found. Now that John had officially pled guilty to Paige's murder, the next step was sentencing. A trial was scheduled for October 2016, just a month away. But in that brief window of time between his plea and the sentencing, rumors began to spread. They moved fast, whispered across the community, that maybe there was more to this case than people originally thought. Some claimed without proof that John and Paige were having an affair. And even more disturbingly, some said Paige was pregnant with his child. She was 15, he was 31. But let's be clear, that rumor about the pregnancy, it was completely ruled out. Paige had undergone a full autopsy. If she had been pregnant, it would have shown up, but she wasn't. That part of the story, as dramatic as it was absolutely false. As for the claim that they had some kind of relationship, investigators went deep into Paige's phone records, her social media, and any other possible communication logs. They looked for texts, calls, messages, anything that showed the two had been in contact outside of the shop, but they found nothing. There was no contact ever made between John and Paige over the phone at all. Now, of course, we can't say with 100% certainty that there was absolutely nothing between John Leatham and Paige. There's no way to be entirely sure unless someone comes forward with proof, and no one ever has. But looking at the available evidence, all signs point to no. There were no text messages, no phone calls, no online communication. There were no reports of them spending time together outside the shop. There weren't even signs of long conversations happening inside the deli. So unless you believe they were carrying on some kind of secret affair entirely through quick, casual chats across the counter and only during deli hours, then the logic behind that rumor starts to fall apart. And while it's true that rumors often thrive in the absence of answers, in this case, there's enough evidence to be fairly confident there was probably nothing between them. But as always, it's up to you. Look at the facts, look at the timeline, and decide what you believe for yourself. Then came the sentencing. On the 12th of October, 2016, John Leatham was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 27 years before he could even be considered for release. The murder weapons, the ones used to inflict Paige's injuries, were never found. Police believe they were most likely a combination of a knife, a pair of scissors, and a screwdriver, based on the wounds to her body. But that's just an informed theory. John has never told anyone where the weapons are, or what exactly he used. He's never confessed to how he got rid of them. That part of the truth remains hidden. And then, just 2 months later, in December 2016, John did something that shocked a lot of people. He appealed his sentence. He argued that it was too harsh, that 27 years was excessive for what he'd done. Unbelievably, the court agreed. They reviewed the case, and they reduced his sentence. Not by much, but enough to feel like a blow. John Leatham's sentence was changed from life with a minimum of 27 years to life with a minimum of 23 years. So, He had 4 years taken off of his sentence. In the middle of all the grief and darkness that followed Page's murder, something truly beautiful happened. In May of 2017, just over a year after Page's death, her mother, Pamela, and her stepfather, Andy Monroe, welcomed a baby girl into the world. They named her Penny Margaret Page, in loving memory of the sister she would never get to meet. The family said it was their way of honoring Page's spirit, keeping her name alive in a household that missed her every single day. But Pamela didn't stop there. She made a promise not just to herself, but to her daughter's memory. She vowed to complete Page's bucket list. All the dreams Page had scribbled down, all the places she wanted to visit, all the things she never got the chance to do. And Pamela meant every word of it. One of the items on Page's list was to visit New York, and later that same year, in late 2017, they made it happen. The family flew to New York and stood in the places Page had dreamed of seeing. Her list also included visiting Barbados, learning to drive, meeting Amy Childs from The Only Way is Essex, and even getting a tattoo. Pamela is still working through those wishes, one by one, living them for Page. And every year on Page's birthday and on Christmas, the family still buys her gifts, not out of denial, but out of love, and then they donate those gifts to charities in Page's name. Gifts she never got to open are now given to others in the spirit of who she was. You might have heard of Pout for Page, a social campaign that became one of the most powerful ways people remembered her. It started shortly after John Latham pled guilty, and is still going strong. The idea came from Page's photos. She was known for her big, playful pout and so many selfies. So the campaign encouraged people to take a photo of themselves pouting, just like Page used to, and post it online with the hashtag #PoutForPage. And it wasn't just strangers who got involved. Celebrities, politicians, and people from all walks of life took part. Thousands of posts flooded social media, all in honor of a girl taken far too soon. But that wasn't all. Page's family also created a charity called Page's Promise. Through the charity, they offer self-defense classes for young people, helping them feel safer, stronger, and more prepared in a world that sometimes isn't fair. They also provide grief counseling for families who have lost someone suddenly, not just through murder, but through any kind of unexpected tragedy. Pamela, Andy, and the rest of the family have done everything they can to turn their pain into something meaningful, to make sure Page's name is never forgotten. They've taken their heartbreak and turned it into action. Because no matter how much time passes, Page's family have done so much in her memory.